Hello and welcome to chapter 17, which is on immunity. In today's session, we are going to look a little bit about how infections occur, look at non-specific immunity in terms of the first line and the second line of defense. Then we're going to look at specific immunity, T cells, B cells, and types of immunity, comparing active and artificial and active and passive and natural and artificial, and just briefly looking at immune disorders and cancer. So let's get started. Why do infections occur? Infections occur because there is a portal of entry, and this is obvious when you have a cut or a wound, a large wound, or something. If you're burned, you have allowed organisms in. Also, the mouth and nose, very good for getting in organisms. It depends on the virulence of the organism, which is how aggressive it is. Also, is there a toxin produced? The dose has to do with the number of pathogens. If you have a small dose, quite often your body can overcome it. And then also individual conditions, you may be have a predisposition for an infection. You may be healthy, so your body can fight off the infection, or you may be easily infected by stuff. Okay, let's first off look at non-specific immunity. Non-specific immunity is a result of lines of defense. It will keep out anything. It's non-specific because it does not attract or attack a specific antigen. And an antigen is just a organism or a protein that will set off an immune response. You have your first line of defense. Basically, your first line of defense, your eyes will water, and in them are antibiotics of your tears, plus your watering tears will wash it away. You have lymph nodes, and in your lymph nodes, if it does get in, it will have phagocytes, and phagocytes will destroy any non-self particle. You're going to have phagocytosis, which is the process of surrounding by macrophages, and macrophages will just surround anything that isn't self. And then you have natural killers, and natural killers will attack cells that are not normal. Then you have the skin, which is a dead, waxy layer on the outside. In your respiratory tract, you have mucus, which will trap things. You have cilia, which move things out. You also have sneezing and coughing as a way to expel things out of your lungs. Your blood is a barrier because it has phagocytosis. You've got digestion of certain enzymes there, and attack of complement proteins. We'll talk about complement proteins later. In your bone marrow, that's where your cells are being made. Your bone marrow have macrophages and granulocytes. Granulocytes is another type of white blood cell, and it will attract it. Then you have your liver also has phagocytes. Phago means eat, sort of like phagocytosis, if you remember back to that cell. Then your spleen also has phagocytes and attack of natural killer cells. Your digestive system, there's a whole theory that your stomach is really acidic because it'll kill anything that got in there the right way. Also, you can vomit to get things out of your body that the body doesn't like, or diarrhea. Get this out of me fast. Also, your urogenital tract, because you flush as you pee and then you flush, you have the acidity of the urine. There's also discussion that menstruation helps clean out the vagina. So various non-specific, it'll get rid of anything that's in there or prevent it. Those are non-specific. So first line is just a barrier. The second line has to do with these cells that will attack once it gets in. So first line, a barrier, skin, mucus membrane, secretions. Second line will attack it once it gets in. Now, once it gets in, you have phagocytes. Phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is a process where white blood cells take in and destroy waste and foreign materials. You have two types of cells that do these: neutrophils, which is a type of white blood cell, and phagocytes, macrophages, which are again a specialized type of white blood cell. You also have your natural killer cells. Your natural killer cells are a type of lymphocyte made in the lymph node, spleen, bone marrow, and blood. They will recognize cells with abnormal membranes and secrete a protein. That protein will land on it and break down the cell membrane. Once the cell membrane is broken, everything oozes out. This is non-specific. They just notice things that are not normal. Then you can also have inflammation. If you've ever got a sliver or something like that, you notice that the infection is caused by, or you notice that heat, swelling, redness, and pain. So what happens is there is heat because there's a surge of blood flow to that area. There's redness because there's a surge of blood flow to that area. There's swelling because there's a surge of blood flow to that area, and pain due to the surge of blood flow in that area. As the cells go into the, so this is normal, you have normal blood flow. If there is an injury, what happens is the neutrophils will adhere to the cell membrane or the epithelial, and that will allow plasma to leak out. As plasma leaks out, you have swelling because you have extra fluid, but we can't just call it swelling. We call it edema. Edema is a fancy word for swelling. As there's plasma leakage, there's also macrophage leakage, which are these specialized white blood cells that will move out and just attack any foreign things. Then they will migrate and attack, and then you have swelling. If you have too many white blood cells that are completely overpowered by the area, what happens is those white blood cells die and you get an inflammatory exudate, which is the fancy word for pus. So what pus is really just dead white blood cells. Okay? Another non-specific thing is fever. So a little fever is good. Too much fever, you're cooking your proteins. When you're having a fever, your phagocytes are at work. They release substances, causes a rise in temperature. This rise in temperature will speed up your cells, speed up your metabolism, speed up your phagocytes, and often slow down the bad guys. Then there is a chemical called interferon. Interferon is a group of substances produced by white cells that will prevent white cells from producing more viruses, or cells to produce more viruses. You just need to know the definition of interferon. You don't need to know that there's alpha, beta, and gamma. It is all non-specific, so anything that isn't normal will affect interferon. Then there is something called a complement. A complement is a specialized protein that attracts immune responses. Its function is to coat the cell, destroy the cell, and attract phagocytes. So a complement will land on the cell. In the process of landing on the cell, it will trigger for the macrophage, which is right here, to come and engulf it. Okay? So it's kind of a way of marking it. Good. That was non-specific immunity. Specific immunity is for a specific disease. Non-specific, anything your body doesn't want. Specific is the power to overcome a specific disease agent. There are characteristics in the fact that it's specific response for a specific pathogen. It can be required over a lifetime, and it's stimulated by antigens. And each specific antigen has a specific response because this is specific immunity. Okay, when we talk about antigens, antigens are just a foreign substance. They enter the body, get into usually the blood supply. It will induce an immune response of certain lymphocytes, and these are the T cells. The T cells start in the bone marrow, then go to the thymus to be adapted. And there's B cells. B cells start in are just in the bone marrow. So T cells originate in bone marrow, where all bone cells arise, but they mature in the thymus. That's why there's a T in T cell. They are specific, and it's called cell-mediated immunity because cells attack other cells. Okay? There are many different types of cells. If you watch the video that is attached, I think the link is attached in video resources, called The Magic Doctor, you will see there are different types of T cells. There are cytotoxic T cells, also called killer Ts. Those are the ones with the little guns. They just kill cells. Then there are helper Ts. Those are the ones with the little phones. The helper T cells are the ones that organize and recruit more cells. You have regulatory T cells, also called suppressor Ts. These are cells that will shut down the response once it's no longer needed. And you have memory cells. Memory T cells are the cells that stick around. They remember that specific antigen fingerprint. And this way, if that antigen attacks again, they will quickly respond by sending out cells, usually the killer Ts, without having to take and go through the whole immunity setup first. They're just there. There's also stimulation of antigen-presenting cells, and that will attract macrophages and dendritic cells. So here we have a helper T cell by a macrophage. So along will come this antigen. The antigen is digested by a lysosome and presents fragments on the outside. Those fragments are picked up by the helper T cells, and the helper T cells will then activate helper T cells to produce interleukin. Interleukin then will stimulate other leukocytes. So inter means between, leuco means white. So this is a chemical that is spread between white type of blood cells. Okay, that is specific immunity. Specific immunity also has B cells. B cells originate in the bone marrow. They produce antibodies, and they produce a humoral immunity, which means it's the immunity in the blood. They have specific cell types, and those cell types are called plasma cells and memory B cells. The big thing we're going to look at here are the antibodies. When you look at the B cell has specific antigen receptors. So what happens is the B cell will bind to the antigen. It will activate the B cell. The B cell will then divide, leaving memory B cells, and it will divide and divide and divide. And these plasma cells will produce antibodies. And antibodies are chemical proteins that will then mark against the antigen and therefore attracting other cells such as phagocytes. So the function of the antibody is to bind to the antigen. It will promote phagocytosis because phagocytosis is the eating of other cell. They're attracted by these antibodies. They will activate natural killer cells. They neutralize toxins, and they will also activate the component. When you look at the antibodies, some are produced at first response, and then there's a second exposure, or often a booster shot, and that will produce a second shot. And I'm going to stop it for there. There'll be a part 2 talking about the types of specific immunity.